we're going to be talking about power tools. I am David Jensen. I am the technical director here at University Theater.
I'm Mike White. I'm the assistant technical director for productions.
And behind the camera, we have Kevin Wright, who is the assistant technical director for events. And then also in the office, we have Jamie Mellema, who is our scenic designer. Today, we're just going to be doing some of the basic hand power tools, some stationary power tools, but mainly just some small hand power tools. And these are just the tools that we use all the time at University Theater, and most theaters use in their shops too. And we're going to start out with one of the most basic universal saws that we have, which is the jigsaw.
Yeah. So the jigsaw is one of the most used and most versatile saws or tools that we have to our disposal. The jigsaw is an oscillating saw. So what it means is the blade on it moves as opposed to, it moves to cut through the material as opposed to using your entire arm or any other piece. The jigsaw is composed of three major parts, which is the motor and the handle, then the foot and the blade. I'm going to make sure that I am unplugged before I touch anything. And don't hurt myself, because safety, 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 safety. Safety is important when using power tools. I can't say it enough. When using them, make sure you know where your body is, where your fingers are, where your toes are, where your materials are. Make sure you don't cut through things that can be harmful or you don't want to cut. The jigsaw can be used for most different types of materials out there. You just have to get the right blades for it. So the blades come in all different shapes and sizes, from your larger all the way down to your very tiny fine-toothed metal blades. They also come in all different shapes of the ends of them, so you just want to make sure that you get the right ones for your own machine, for your own tool. So going a little bit more. So variable speed, meaning the more you pull the trigger, the faster it'll go. So depending on your material, some need it you to move faster, some need it to go slower. The big thing you want to remember is when you cut, you want to make sure your foot is flat against your surface. So when cutting through this piece of Luan, you want to make sure that your foot stays flat on your surface. If you want to cut it at an angle or something more than a 90-degree angle, then some of them have the ability to jigsaw, press your foot. So your foot wants to make sure that it is flat on your work surface. For this one, we're going to be using Luan because it's something I have readily available and it's very easy to cut through. These can cut through a variety of different sizes of materials, just all according to what you use for your blade. Your blades will be labeled on the packaging of what it will support or what it's manufactured for. I have a small fine-tooth blade, which is used for a lot more finer curves and turns, but it is what is in my machine, so that's what I'm going to use. Some jigsaws have the ability to move your foot so that it can go at a different angle other than a 90-degree cut. Just look at what your guides on your own thing say on how to do it. So changing the blade, specifically on this Bosch, they're all different depending on your brands and how to do them. But I will show you on this one how to change your blade. I'll just leave this one in though. So it has this lever on the front that you slide over. Make sure you grab it. Make sure it is unplugged before you touch it so that you don't hurt yourself accidentally. So we will press this all the way over, grab the blade, and it comes out. Essentially, it's just a locking mechanism that twists inside of this one. So to put the blade in, you slide it all the way back over again. Make sure the blade is facing the right direction, goes all the way in, and then locks all the way down and doesn't come out. That's all this one's to it. There is a lock on this tool so that you can lock it on if needed to. so that it always stays on. But we won't do it for this one. So all you would have to do is pull in the trigger so that it's on, and then press this little lever and it stays on until you pull the trigger again. So we will do a demonstration. Make sure safety glasses. Almost all of these tools will require safety glasses, if not more. So make sure you have safety glasses readily available, or if you come into our shop, we have them. So you want to make sure that you are safe and secure and you don't hurt yourself or other people around you. So I'll do safety glasses, and I will secure my piece of wood to the table with some clamps, making sure I'm not going to cut through them with my blade. And then I will plug it in, make sure it's nice and plugged in. And then it works. Make sure your feet and legs are away from the blade. Control it at all times, once it is plugged in or not. So I'm just going to go straight across here. I don't have a line, but that's okay. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So make sure your hands are out of the way and the blade is all the way up against the surface. And then we'll pull it and we'll go a little bit faster so that it can get a nicer cut than if you go slower, it'll tear up more. So if you can mute for a minute, just so it's not super loud. And when cutting through, you want to make sure you control where the blade is, that there's nobody else around you or anything else that you can harm. So when you go all the way through, you don't hurt anybody or anything. And that's the basics of the jigsaw. Make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I don't think so. So we're going to go into a slideshow of different things and different uses of the jigsaw in a show capacity.
This is some of the shows that we've done here at University Theater. And this show was Bright Star. So this is it's a little dark, but you can see up here the cloud shaped up here and also the mountains down here. So this is just a really good example of, being able to cut something out with the jigsaw. This was Fiddler on the Roof. This was The Village. And again, a jigsaw just used to cut out all these boards. This was Rainmaker. So all these house profiles were all cut out jigsaw. Also, actually, they weren't, they were actually cut out with the CNC, but anyway, most theaters don't have CNCs, but again, it's the shape that you're trying to be able to get. That's why the jigsaw is so good. It's good at cutting out all these abstract kind of strange shapes. I'm sorry, the CNC router that we have, which is our shop bot. So it's basically a robot that will cut out all kinds of shapes for us. And we will actually talk about that a little bit once we get to the routers. So we'll be talking about that more soon. This was Cabaret. This is a really good example of Jamie Mellman destroying flats that we already had in stock because they were getting so old. But the great thing about the jigsaw is it's just so portable. You can just kind of take it to whatever and cut it out. And this is, you can see all this stuff was cut out with a jigsaw to get that shape. And this is all brick in the back. So it's all following the profile of the brick. And, and then something's afoot. So let me go to the next one because you can see it a little bit better because it's in black light. So again, these were older flats and just kind of cut out to the profile. And then Secret Garden. Again, we did this with the CNC. Let me go to the next image because you can see that shape a little bit better. But this is something if we did not have the CNC, and we did actually get the CNC just like 2 months before the show opened, so it made it a lot easier to be able to do this shape. And I think, yep, that's it for. So now we're going to talk about the bandsaw. So the bandsaw is kind of similar in a lot of ways to the jigsaw, because it's not a really big blade. It's not typically used for cutting really straight lines. This blade, you can see, is actually kind of thick. So we have two bandsaws. Let me see it if I put my hand behind it a little bit better. We have this one, which is for straighter cuts, and then we have another bandsaw over there that is a thinner blade, and we'll go over there and take a look at that. And it's just nice to be able to have two bandsaws. We have this space, so we're not having to constantly kind of swap out the blades for one for the other, depending on the cut. So the bandsaw is named a bandsaw because the blade is one big band that goes around and around. And what's nice about the bandsaw is it's just going in one direction. So the teeth are pointed down. So it's kind of just cutting through, going that way. So it's leaving the top surface nice and smooth. Where the bottom side, there could be some kind of blowout from the blades kind of going through. So usually you typically want only one side looking good or not. So that's why the bandsaw is nice, where it's the jigsaw, the blade's going back and forth, so it can have some blowout on both sides. The bandsaw, though, does have the limitations of where this column sits. So I can only cut things this big in the bandsaw, where with the jigsaw, you can take it to anything. But this bandsaw is great for projects. It's really handy to have. We do use it quite a bit still. Safety things, the guard here, there's two functions of this. So one, it covers up the blade so you don't cut yourself. Two, it also has the guide wheels here. So the guide wheels help keep the blade where you want it. So you typically want the guide wheels right above what you're working on. One, so you're cutting down on the exposure of the blade, so you don't have a whole bunch of blades sticking up that you don't need. Two, once you get it to where you want it and you kind of lock it down, that helps take some of the flex out of that blade. Then that way you don't have a bunch of blade kind of flexing around, because it is just a thin band that's going around. The other thing about the bandsaws and most of the power tools is they've got a safety system kind of built in for the on-off. So the on button here is kind of surrounded by the housing here. So you have to push directly on it to turn it off, turn it on. To turn it off, this stands proud, so it's easy to be able to hit it off whenever you need to. So we're gonna go over to the other bandsaw over here. So it's same type of machine, but this one's just a thinner blade. Thinner blade, you can do smaller cuts or smaller radius cuts, because you think about a blade, you kind of have to think of it like a chunk. So it's got teeth on this side, and then the rest of it is just kind of a body that's supporting the teeth. So you can't just take this and turn it. But if you make it a smaller body, then it's easier to be able to make turns and stuff. So this one, I'm going to do a scroll, something kind of like that. So same thing, start recesses, the stop stands proud. This saw is nice because it has a little air pump hooked up to the motor on the bottom. So it kind of blows some of the saw chips out of the way as you're cutting. So a little loud, it's a little squeaky. Might as well go ahead and mute it. screw gun?
Hmm?
Could you grab me the screw gun? I forgot to grab the screw gun. All right, so that was pretty quick, but you can see it does pretty nice work. And what's nice about the bandsaw is that this is all you're controlling. So it's kind of, I kind of feel like it's almost like a sewing machine. You're just kind of feeding it in, but rather than stitching it together, you're just cutting it apart. It's a pretty safe saw. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong. The one big thing though that I always say is to keep your hands out of the path. Because if I'm kind of pushing this right where I'm cutting, say if Mike walks into the shop and then trips and bumps into me, my hands could go into the blade. So if you keep your hands way to the side, if something happens, or if you're just kind of pushing hard and you slip, your hands are going to slip around the blade rather than into the blade. One of the fun tricks that we do quite a bit is cutting circles with the bandsaw. Used to do it all the time because it's just a really kind of quick way. So this table on here is just a table that we added on. And we've got a line here that matches up to the front of the blade. So if I want to cut a 12-inch diameter circle, then I'm going to measure out 6 inches from there, take a piece of wood, put a screw into the center, and this table is fairly new. The last table had 5,000 screw holes kind of coming out here, and it wasn't really easy to use anymore. Use the light to line up. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Yes. So, a fun little trick that will save you a lot of time, and it will get you a pretty good looking circle. So after you got it set, the table's pulled back. What you're gonna do is you're just gonna slide the table in and then just spin the work. So you got a pretty good looking circle. So that's the bandsaw. It's a great tool to have, but I actually prefer a jigsaw, but there's lots of things that, it's really nice to be able to have a bandsaw for. I think now we're going to go back over to Mike, and we're going to be talking about a sawzall or reciprocating saw.
Yeah. So the reciprocating saw, or the sawzall, which is a brand of them, is one of the more fun tools in the shop because it's built for destruction. It can be used for less precise cutting if you really need to, but its main thing is to tear things apart. So the sawzall is known for having large blades that can reach into large, thick materials to cut them apart. Anything from wood to steel to aluminum. Here's a steel blade versus a wood blade. Smaller teeth, finer teeth, better for cutting different materials. So similar to the jigsaw, you buy the blades for the material that you want to cut. With this one and with most of them, ours is battery powered, but there are also wired ones. How this one works is I'll make sure its safety is on just to be safe. Nope. Safety is on before I start putting the blade in. So with this one, it has this lever here on the side. that you lift up to release the action to put the blade in. So the blade goes in the front and locks all the way down in. Release the side lever, make sure it goes down, make sure your blade's in. It's very similar to the jigsaw. This one also has a foot. You want to make sure that the foot stays against your material at all times while you're cutting so that it doesn't jostle on you. So this one has an action, let me unlock it, that it goes back and forth. Again, variable speed. The more you pull the trigger, the faster it will go. Yeah, so let's cut with it. So when using the saw, it has a large blade that protrudes out. So you want to make sure that you know where your body is and where the other people around you are. Same thing as every tool as before, but this one especially, because the blade doesn't care. The blade will go wherever you tell it to. So when cutting through, you want to make sure that when you reach the end, you don't swing and hit yourself in the legs. Make sure you wear safety glasses. Safety glasses are very important because this one throws material around. So we'll start further away. There are many different ways to use this tool, but the best way and easiest way to do it is start further away from you and work your way towards you. But make sure that the blade always aims away. So we'll go, make sure your foot is down against it, and then we'll go through. And that's all the way through it. As you can see, it jiggles a lot. So that's why it's important to push against the material and make sure the foot stays aligned with it and doesn't jiggle. Because if it doesn't, then you're going to get jiggled, essentially. Other than that, I think that's basically the entire tool. It's pretty versatile, but also is used mainly for destruction. Next, we'll go over to circ saw.
Yeah. So the sawzall is not for cutting straight lines. It is just for destruction only. The circular saw is not for cutting circles. It is cutting for straight lines. So the reason it's called a circular saw is because the blade moves in a circular motion. But so we talked about this a little bit with the bandsaw over there, as far as here's the teeth, and this is what's holding the teeth. So you can see there's a lot of area right here from this side to this side. So this wants to go in a straight line. If you try to go into a circle, what is it going to do? It's just going to bind. And then that binding is a bad thing because this is spinning like a wheel. So you have to think about a lot of these tools like a wheel because a lot of them are just spinning wheels. So if you turn and this rubs, it's going to cause friction and it's just going to rub and it's going to want to come back. And the problem is that you are kind of behind it. So it's going to come back at you. So that's pretty much the main reason that we consider the circular saw to be the most dangerous saw in the shop. Because it's really powerful, but it's also very portable. So there's a lot of power right there. And again, it's that kickback that could come back at you and get you in that vein that kind of runs through your leg. So the biggest thing with the circ saw is never stand right behind it when you're cutting. You always want to be to the side like this. Kevin, you want to come over here? This is probably going to be the better place to see. So if I'm behind it, this is the danger zone. If I'm beside it, if it kicks back, it's going to just go past me rather than into me. There's a couple of safety things that you want to be aware of. Just make sure I'm unplugged there. So it has an adjustable foot. So this adjusts depending on what you're cutting through. So if I'm cutting through a thin material, then again, it's kind of like the bandsaw, then I only need a little bit of the blade exposed. The more blade exposed, the bigger hazard it is. So if I kind of adjust that down, then lock that into position, now I don't have too much of a blade, and I'm cutting down on the amount of the blade there too that could rub and kick back. And you can see it also has a spring guard here, which in theory does snap back after every cut. Don't always trust that though. And that's basically it. The foot is somewhat adjustable as far as being able to tilt and stuff, but usually we're just kind of cutting straight lines with it. And I'm just going to do a quick demonstration on cutting this line. So when you're cutting with circ saw, because your foot is all the way out here and your blade's all the way back here, it's going to be a while before, it's going to take a little bit to get that blind up. So I always say to look in two different spots. Look at the front, there's some marks here, and then also look at your blade. So you're looking at two different spots, and that way it helps line you up with the line. Because if you're just looking at the blade, it's easy to kind of get off a little bit. So you're looking where you are, and you're looking at where you're going, both at the same time, kind of going back and forth. And this is definitely going to get loud. So Kevin, you want to mute right before I cut. And glass is fogging up, of course. Always be aware, just like with any of the saws, where your cord is. You don't want to run into your cord. Okay, so line up there, then just kind of make sure that you're well supported on your foot. Okay, here we go. Okay, so circular saw is for cutting straight lines only. So something that we do have, and we've got a variety of them, but this is just one of them right here, is a circular saw guide. So this is a good example of being able to cut. So here's the factory edges here. For this, we wanted to cut this long diagonal going across it. So we don't have any of our other chop saws or ready arm saws that could make this kind of angle. So what we can use though, to make sure that we're getting a really nice straight cut, is a guide like this. So if I've got this lined up on my pencil mark, then this is the distance from the edge of the foot to the inside edge of the blade. So when I line this up down at the end, it's just going to have the foot right up against this piece. And so I don't even have to pay attention to the blade. All I'm watching now is the foot to make sure the foot is staying up against that guide. And then I know I'm going to cut exactly where it needs to be. And this is what we're just looking at, which was this floor right here for ragtime. So this was comprised of a whole bunch of pieces with funky long angles. So being able to use the circ saw for that is a really good thing. All right, so that's it for that. Now we are going to go onto the router, and Mike's going to do that. And we use routers all the time. So we've got a bunch of them.
Yeah, so that's a majority of the saws that we use that are handheld. But we'll move on to more finishing tools now. So the routers are definitely more of a finer work finishing tool, but we also do use it for making large sweeping cuts. So there are three primary types of routers that we use. There are two standard base, which means that the base of it is fixed at a certain height on the router, which can be adjusted manually through fiddling with it or changing just how it's set up. The two of them that we have are the small laminate routers, which are usually smaller horsepower, under 1 horse, small routers which are meant to go through laminate or Luan or any thin piece of material. They are not meant to go through large, thick pieces of material. When you want to do that, you'll move up to the larger routers, like these fixed base ones or the plunge router. Starting with the fixed base, this router is around 2 horsepower. I don't know exactly, I don't remember. But it can go through a lot thicker materials or do a lot more ornate cuts. The difference with the plunge router is it does not have a fixed base. So it has a lever on it that allows the base and the whole machine to raise and lower and be adjusted quickly on the fly to push into a piece of material or to cut an edge out. Not to say that it can't be used like any other fixed routers, because it can, but they're just different types. With a router and with any router, I'll show with the laminate because it's the smallest and easiest to use. You have your foot, again, your motor, and then the blade. The blades on routers are different than most blades because they are round, because they spin rather than trying to cut through specifically. So what they do is they eat away at the edge of your material rather than cutting straight through. These ones, this one here is a flush trim bit, which is what we use mostly. So what it means is it will cut up against the edge of a piece of material without going into it so that you can get a nice flush edge. That's done by having this ball bearing here that prevents it from eating into the material more than you want it to. Other router bits, there are lots of them. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, many different ways to use them. But these are pretty similar, pretty basic. This is a 2-fluted standard bit that can dive and eat down into a piece of material and then cut on the inside. Using these routers, you want to make sure that you have your height adjusted to what you want it to be properly adjusted to, so that you know you're using the correct bit and that your bit is set to the height that you want it to cut to make the proper design, or your flush bit so you don't improperly cut it or cut through materials that you don't want to. Once you have the height set, to use it, you want to make sure that it is flat against your piece of material. And then once you turn it on, you will push it in against the material. And then with flush trim bits or other ones that aren't supposed to eat through your material, you will then right around the outside of the material to do your cut, making sure you push up against the ball bearing. There are proper directions to push a router. So for the routers, most of them, you can see that the blades are only on one side. They don't continue on the other. So when they spin in a clockwise direction, eating into your material. So say if my finger is the material, and you want it to basically scoop out your material as it spins. So you don't want to run it along the opposite direction of the blade, because all it'll do is just basically roll against it. So you're essentially then just moving along with the blade. So what you want to do is you want to go opposite the rotation of the blade so that it carves out chunks of your material. So I'm going to show you guys how to use it with this medium standard base router. We have a special little plate on it just for operation. It has an OG bit. If you want to see more of a defined look of what an OG profile is, they're everywhere online. It's a very standard finishing bit. With bits like this, you can usually see what the ending profile will look like if you look down the edge of the blade. There are lots of different types of blades, from lots of fun finishing angles and shapes to doing things like dovetails or joints and all that kinds of things. So I'm going to cut this nice little OG, which I already have set at my height, into this piece of 2x4. So before, make sure that it's in a position that it's safe and there's nobody else that's going to hit it or get hurt by it before you plug it in. Most people will like to sit it on its side. Just make sure it's not face down so that it doesn't spin into things or it can't hurt its own. It can't hurt you, it can't hurt anybody else, and it can't hurt itself by cutting through its own cord. So then we'll plug it in so that it's off. On this one, we'll use these two little handles. Make sure your cord is out of the way. And we're going to go counterclockwise. So we're just going to do one side. We're going to go from left to right because that is the way that the blade spins. So this one has a little lever. All of them are different on how they turn on. Just look at the brand that you have, or we can show you if you come in here. So this one has a little switch, and then we'll do it. As you can see, it creates a lot of dust and a lot of extra wood everywhere. So, and extra sawdust. So if you're using them for a long time, you'll want to be more into using either a dust mask or a respirator or something else along with your safety glasses. And if you have prolonged exposure to it, you will want to use hearing protection also. So this one created a nice little OG shape into our 2x4. And you want to make sure that you have a nice firm grip on it while you do it because it will try to run away from you. So you just want to make sure you keep control over it. There are two other types of routers that we have in our shop. One of them being this tabletop bench router. All it is essentially a router that is fitted to a table underneath. So where most portable routers, the router goes to the material. Here, the material goes through the router. So it has a fence and it has a table along with, we use feather boards and push sticks to make sure that our material is safe and it doesn't try to fly away from you.
Mike, let's skip the demo on this.
Yeah,
I think we can show this because we had some of the mic problems. So you can see it's a round over bit in there. So it just kind of gave this round over profile. And basically it's just, again, you need to know which way to feed it. And then you just feed it through. And again, that bearing just kind of spins on it. Or it just rides along the fence and the fence is doing that profile.
You just want to make sure you keep your fingers away from...
Exactly. Because
away from it.
That's an exposed blade, so having a push stick is always a good idea because then that push stick is what goes over the blade and not your fingers. Our
other last type that we have is our CNC router, which our CNC router, it's our computer numerical controlled router. So essentially it runs on a gantry, which is a large moving head. It has a large spindle that can move up and down. It can move in all three axes in X, Y, and Z. And it is controlled through a program that we set it up to run a certain pattern to cut all the different pieces that we need. It is amazing to have and to invest in because it will save so much time making circles or any signage or ornate shapes or anything else that you would traditionally use any of these other tools for. As long as it fits in your table and it fits within your parameters, it will cut it. You just need to put in the right bit in the right feeds and speeds, and it'll do it. It's amazing. Next, we're going to go into...
Mike, did you talk about cutting circles?
Cutting circles.
So just real quick, so another way of cutting circles. So again, with the bandsaw, when we're talking about being limited by that column for the bandsaw, something that we can do is use a router with just a straight bit, which has no ball bearing on it. Is just a straight cutting bit, which is what we use a lot in the CNC. That's all that is just a straight bit kind of cutting things out. But if we mount it to something, then we can kind of swing that arch again. So you kind of measure out your radius and you figure that out. So that's just a quick little one that we made. You can buy them. They're just kind of a universal mount, and you just kind of find the radius that you want, and then you drop a screw in there, and that will cut that. And then when you want to get even bigger, then this is kind of a mount for one of the plunge routers, because when you're cutting out something like 3/4 inch ply, you can't just cut through 3/4 in one pass. That's where the plunge comes in really handy. You plunge it down 1/4 of an inch, you cut a pass, cut it, drop it down another 1/4 of an inch, do a pass, and then kind of finish it off that way. So again, before we add the CNC, that is how we cut our really big circles. And so this was Arabian Nights. So this was a good example of using the flush trim bit. So we made a profile. So there's all these arches, and we didn't want to cut them out, each time. We just wanted to make one. And then with that flush trim bit, we can just match all the other ones to that one, because that ball bearing will ride on the one underneath, and it will cut out the profile as it's kind of following along the one under it. So it's a way of being able to copy things. Flush trim bit is a great thing. And same thing. So again, this was the back profile was cut out, and then we put these top boards on, and then we just took that flush trim bit and just cut it so it matched the back profile. That was, again, Bright Star. Same thing, this was Jekyll and Hyde. So we had this shape throughout all these cabinets here. And we just had one, and we just kind of cut all the other ones to just kind of match that. And this floor is a really good example of, you can see all these circles going around, getting bigger and bigger. So same thing that I was just showing you with that circle jig. This is our center pivot. We would put a router out onto the end of it and swing that arch to cut our flooring pieces. Then that all kind of matched up like that. And then again, here's another circle. Being able to cut out circles with rather large circles is a nice thing. And royal family again. And that's it. So sanders. We've got a bunch of them. Let's talk about this one first, because we use this one quite a bit. This is just a random orbital sander. It's named that because the spins in somewhat of a random orbit. It doesn't just spin in a circle, because otherwise, if you sand, you're just going to get circle patterns and everything. So it's in a little bit of a oblong kind of pattern. So it kind of moves it around a little bit. So you're not just leaving circle marks all over your stuff. And it's pretty easy operation, just on off switch here. What's nice about it is it does have this dust port on the back. This is just a Velcro, pretty much a hook and loop paper that just attaches to the bottom. And if you do line up those holes, it does a really good job of pulling that dust in and pulling it in here, so it's not going all over the place. Variable speed, and pretty much you kind of let this do most of the work. You give a little bit of a push down, but most of it is taken care of by this. So this paint on here is pretty thick, so it's going to take a while to get through that. You can always vary the grit on here. You can get a rougher grit, smoother grit, depending on the type of finish that you're going to get. You can do some distressing with this, which is nice. Kind of get into the corners and stuff. You can give it a little bit of that antique look and whatnot. But if you're looking to remove a lot of material quickly, then you're going to want to use something like this, which is a belt sander. We've got two different belt sanders here. So this one is a 3-inch by 21, and this is a 4-inch by 24-inch. And it's a belt that just kind of spins around and around. One of the biggest things that we say with the belt sander is make sure it is off when it is plugged in. So a lot of tools have a lock, because if you're sanding a lot, and if your finger just gets tired of pulling the trigger, you're just going to put it into the lock position. The problem is if it's in the lock position and you plug it in, that belt is going to take off and go. And these things have a lot of power, actually. There is such a thing called belt sander racing. You can actually, I've seen it. I've seen people make a seat and put it on here, and then they sit on it and they race people across the room. Or they just race their belt sanders across the room. They put them in a little track and they just kind of run them. It's a lot of fun. But Jamie has a really good idea. He always puts it on the side before plugging it in. So let's see, this one's a pretty rough grit. So it's gonna kind of tear a lot of this stuff up pretty quick. Oh, so it's gonna move the table around. So I'm gonna hold the table down. So you can see it kind of tears it up pretty quick. So the belt sander is great. Also, again, really good for distressing, kind of roughing things up, antiquing things. Really good for fixing mistakes. Another sander that we have is a profile sander. This is good for more like furniture type things. It's not something that we use a ton, but it's really nice to be able to kind of get into corners and stuff. Kind of along the same line as sanders is a grinder, because, and the grinder is really, really versatile. So there's lots of different things that you can do with the grinder, such as using something like this, which is a flap disc, which is a sanding disc, which is good for sanding steel and other things. It also has a grinding wheel. So you can see it's a little thicker. This is good for just grinding down steel, grinding down edges of things. And it also has a cutting wheel. So this is much thinner than this. So this is for cutting steel. There are other things. You can put sanding pads in them. They make wire cup pads. That's again for finishing type stuff. You can get masonry cutting discs, and I've actually seen they do actually have one for cutting wood. I've never used one. It looks pretty scary, but could be fun. So that's kind of the sanding, grinding kind of stuff. I think that's about it. And then next, we're going to go over to Mike to talk about drill press.
Yeah, so the drill press is a large stationary drill. So most people know what a drill is in terms of like a portable handheld drill. So it drills holes into materials. But these are larger and stationary drills, essentially. So the drill press is one fixed speed, depending on how you set it. There are different ways, different speeds that you can set them depending on how you center your belts and everything to go on different speeds. This one we have set on a semi-medium to slow speed. So it has in it what is called a keyed chuck. So what that means is to be able to put in your bit, you need this key, and it has these holes fixed into the chuck that it fits in, and you twist it to lock it in or twist it to loosen it and to be able to pull your bit in and out. So these ones, this bit is meant to cut through wood, so that's what we will do. So it is nice and tight. You always want to make sure that it's nice and tightened down on multiple points. It has Make sure your guard is nice and down and safe so that everybody is safe. It has this 3-point basically movement action so that it will lower your bit down onto your wood and onto your table. The table on this one, since it is a floor drill press, can move up and down depending on the height of the material that you're using. We have it set up pretty high because we're only cutting a 2x4. Safety, always safety. I will always keep repeating it. So you will line up your wood wherever you have marked your spot that you want to drill your hole. You'll put in your proper size bit for whatever you need to cut, for whatever size hole you want to drill. You will want to clamp down your material to your fence and make sure it is in the position you want. I highly recommend using sacrificial pieces underneath so that you don't drill into your table. Some drill presses have a hole in them so that they don't, but this one is a pretty solid one, so we'll use a sacrificial piece to drill down into. It does have a stopping point that isn't set right now, so whenever, if you go and move the head down, it can stop it. But we'll just go by today, since it isn't set. I'll move it down for you just to see. We'll just drill down through until I can feel that it's through this piece, but not quite through the one by. So it's the same setup for start and stop as the belt sand, or the bandsaw words, where it has the protruding stop and the receded start. So we'll make sure everything is clear before it starts to spin. So you'll start. It's pretty quiet, so you don't really need to be too worried about it. This one at least is quiet. So we'll have it lined up on our mark. Make sure you keep everything out of the way, and then just keep a hand on your material just in case, but further away. And you'll just bring it down easy and go back up to get rid of your sawdust and your chips. And just keep going through until you can feel that it is through your 2x. And just clean it out a little bit. And then get rid of your sawdust. And then you have a hole. It's a nice drilled hole. And that is what the drill press is good at. It's good at making very consistent holes over and over again, making sure that they're perfectly perpendicular or perfectly straight up and down to what you need. So nice straight drilled holes. Next, we're going to move over to the planer.
Yep. The planer is something that we don't use a ton, but it is really nice to be able to have in the shop. Basically, there is a drum inside there with these 2 blades, and these are mounted in the drum, and they basically just kind of spin round and around. So it's almost kind of like it's sanding, but it's actually blades, so it's cutting. So you have to just take your time, and it says only do a 16th at a time, but I don't even like to do a 16th. I like to go less than that. So if, say, perhaps we've got this piece of wood, which is 3/4 of an inch thick, but we want it to be 1/2 inch thick, then being able to cut this on a table saw would be pretty difficult because it's such a high profile. So having a planer be able to come along and just, it takes a while because it's only going to take off at 32nd, so the 16th every pass, but you can keep passing it through, and it will become, 1/2 inch thick eventually. It's got some a drum in there, a drive that actually kind of grabs the wood, so it kind of pulls it through for you. And you just kind of, there's an indicator. I think I may need to adjust it, but let's see what it does. I'm kind of hitting it. I didn't do a test on this, but we're going to take this piece of wood that's been painted so we can see it turn back into this. I may need to do 2 passes, but it's a pretty short piece of wood, so it shouldn't take too long. This thing is really loud though, so we're definitely going to want to mute, okay? So you can see how uneven the surface of that wood was. So it just kind of planed evenly across the whole top. So after doing that pass, then I'd lower the blades down again, and it would do another pass, and another pass, and another pass. So it takes a while, but it's very even, it's very consistent. So it's a really kind of handy thing to have. So that's basically it. So it's a planer. It will do something 13 inches thick. This is kind of a lightweight version, but it does the job for theater for us. And then after that, we're going to go over to Mike, who's going to talk about the tools that we use the most.
Yeah. Can you grab me a couple long screws? I don't have any screws. Thank you. So drills and impact drivers. The drills and the impact drivers, people use the terms very fluidly between them. But this is a drill. So a drill is a chuck. It's a keyless chuck that is meant for drilling holes or putting screws in, depending on what functions your drills have. This one has 3 functions in it. This drill has a hammer function. So what it means is that it hits harder with a lot more torque to be able to get through harder material. It's got a center function, which doesn't engage as much of a clutch in it. Or this is the clutch itself. It doesn't engage much more torque into it. And then this other one, which is the screw function, it adds more torque so that it can put in screws and not just drill a hole. We primarily use the drills for drilling holes because we also have impact drivers. So impact drivers are slightly different than drills because they have a different function where they use more torque to essentially impact into the screw to drive it into the wood or your material that you're drilling into. So it is a lot better for putting in screws or anything with a harder material. And you can see on it that it does not actually have a chuck. It just has a quick release that it connects into. So with this one, you'll just pull out the quick release. It releases some ball bearings inside and then has a properly fitted one that goes into it and it just holds it. Back to the drills. The drills, both of these are variable speed. So the more you pull the trigger, the faster it will go. The drill itself is very good for holding on to drill bits or any other thing that is just a blank shank on it. So with this keyless chuck, it just spins to be able to open and close the chuck on it. So we'll open it enough to be able to fit our bit in so that it's nice and straight. You'll tighten it down onto it, and then we'll tighten it down nicely. You can hear it click, and then it is nice and secure. With both of these tools, it has a forward and backward function. The button for it is down here by the trigger. So this is the trigger. It has this button here that pushes to the other side to tell you which direction it is going. So currently, it is going in reverse because you can see that it is going counterclockwise. So to get it into forward, you will push this across, and now it is going. Both of these function in the same way of how to use them. So you will, let me put on my safety glasses. You will hold your material down or secure it in place. You want to get your body over top of the drill and make sure your bit is on the point where you want to drill your hole or put in your screw or anything like that. Make sure you have a hold on your material, that you are not too close to it so that you cannot hurt yourself. Make sure your fingers are away from it. Hold it down, put your body over top so you use your body weight to force through the drill. Because if you just go, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to spin. So you actually have to put force into it, making sure it's going forwards to go in. So you'll put your whole body weight over top of it. I like to use your whole arm and your shoulder to push into it. And so for drilling, you don't need to go in reverse to pull it out. You just keep drilling and just pull. When it comes, so then you have your nice hole. Similar to the drill press, just portable. When it comes to putting in screws, it takes a lot more force. So I like to use an impact driver because it makes it somewhat easier to do. So we've got our Phillips head bit on here. There's lots of different types of bits that you can learn about. Flatheads, Phillips bits, lots of different types of Phillips bits. But we just use a Phillips. And make sure your screws are the same as your bits and everything to be able to work with it. So this is a 3-inch screw, or 2.5-inch screw. It's 3. And we will put it in our place that we have drilled here. So we have a hole over here that's already drilled for me. And I'm going to put my whole body weight over top of it. We will clamp this down just to be safe, and I can show you proper ways of doing this. So I'll clamp down my material. Sometimes necessary, sometimes not, depending on what you're doing. So now I will put it in the spot that I want to put in the screw. Make sure that the impact driver or the drill is vertical with the screw all the way up it, so that you are driving straight in. Otherwise, you're going to get off and it's going to make a terrible noise. Make sure you're going forward. Put my hand on the back of the impact driver so I can get my full body weight over top of it, and just push and slowly drive it in. So it is all the way nice and in now. You can see that it's nice and tight up against the material. If I were to get off, you would hear this sound, which is a bad sound. So if it does that, you're going to stop, reassess if you're lined up, and then continue driving easily in. If it continues, you may have to pull it out and move your screw to a new place, or reassess how you're putting your screw in. It takes a lot of force to put it in to the wood or your other materials. It takes just as much force to pull the screw out. So if you think that going in reverse, that it'll just do it, this one is for some reason. But usually, typically, it won't. It'll just spin. It'll just spin like this. So you have to put just as much force into it to pull the screw out. So the squeaking noise is just the wood being pushed out of the way of the screw, so that it's the screw working its way in or out of the material. That is the basics of the drill. It's got, these are the cordless, so they're nice.
Hey,
better folks. What's your question?
How do you decide when you need a pilot hole?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's all dependent on your material, your location that you're drilling, or like the riskiness of it splitting. So with a 2x4, you have a lot less risk of splitting your wood because it is a thicker piece. So it's good to drill a pilot hole. So a pilot hole is where you drill a hole before you put in the screw, versus just driving screws in. With a smaller piece of wood, like a 1x4 or a 1 by anything or smaller, they have a tendency because of their grain to split, which is bad for the wood. So what you want to do, or if you're at the very end of a piece, you will want to drill a pilot hole or pre-drill, and so that it will drill the hole for you without having the screw do it. So it will pull out the material rather than pushing it to the side. So it will prevent it from splitting.
Sure. Let me just kind of follow up. Mike said it. So if you're close to the end, you're going to have a much greater chance of that grain just splitting. If you're closer in here, then it may split. But what we use is just 2x4 pine and spruce. So it's really soft wood. So it's really kind of forgiving. if you're drilling into or going to try and put a screw into anything hardwood, you definitely need
Yes.
to pre-drill. But anytime you're out towards the edge, you really have that danger of it splitting, even along the edge here. So it kind of depends on where you are, and it depends on the material that you're using. Jamie, you had a question? We don't have anything to build, so we're just kind of doing lots of things around the theater, just taking care of lots of problems that we've had, tasks and cleaning up and stuff like that. But I'm hoping soon that we'll be able to start having some shop hours to be able to come in and work on the shows. So, and again, I'm just kind of waiting on the designs. So I will be posting things to the green room list and putting it out there, kind of saying, this is when we're going to be hosting shop hours.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, in the typical semester, the shop hours are 10 to 12 and 2 to 6 every single day.
Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday. Sorry, not the weekends.
No.
But we do have some weekend work when we do load-ins and strikes, when we take the shows, put them on the truck and bring it over to Stewart, or at the end of the show, which is typically on a Sunday, and we take it down. And so we're always hoping for people then. And hopefully, again, we may be doing that this semester for Static. We've got Static in the Titmus Theater this semester. Cross my fingers. And then we'll also have the Devise 2020, which is going to be somewhere on campus. We're still kind of talking about that. So we'll be doing things with that. And then maybe we'll be working on another project I can't really talk about. But we could have some parts and pieces of that. So we're going to announce things.
Hopefully we can get back to a normal schedule eventually.
Eventually, next semester, hopefully we'll be back in here. But this semester is kind of strange, so I'm just kind of waiting until I get some more information. So,
and once we get back into a normal schedule, there'll be emails sent out about how to get involved in the shop, in building things or painting things, or sometimes propping things, all that kind of stuff. Emails will come through the green room. And telling you how to get involved with it.
So the green room listserv, that email is the best way to get information from us. Or you can always just email us directly. And so David Jensen or Michael White or Jamie Mellema, you can find us and just kind of email us and let us know, if you're interested. We also have the due for next week, next Thursday from 4 to 6. If you want to be able to come in, that's another way to get involved. Come on in from 4 to 6 and you can use any of these tools. So this is the think part of the how-to series, where we tell you about it. And hopefully you've watched it all. And then next week, you can come in and you can try out any of these tools. So that's another way of getting involved.
Make sure you sign up on the website.
Yes, please. We need to know how many people are coming. If we have too many, we can't have too many people in the room. So we're going to have to try to split them up if there's too many people. So thank you very much. And we're going to get out of here. Please sign up for the other ones. And hopefully we'll see someone next week.